Part 1. The wedding that should have been a warning. I remember the first time I met Daniel Ashworth. He was standing at the edge of my daughter's college graduation party, nursing a glass of red wine with the kind of patience that I now understand was not patience at all, it was calculation. He was watching. He was always watching. My daughter Claire was 23 that summer. She had her father's eyes, deep hazel, always a little distant, like she was looking at something just beyond the horizon. She had my stubbornness, my laugh, my terrible habit of trusting people far too quickly. She had just graduated with a degree in environmental science, had a job offer waiting for her in Portland, and a whole beautiful life stretched out before her like a highway in open country. Daniel Ashworth was 31. He was handsome in the way that certain men are handsome, not warmly, not in a way that made you feel good, but in a way that made you feel slightly off balance, like you were standing on a ship deck that was tilting just a few degrees. He had dark hair, square jaw, sharp blue eyes that could go very still when he wanted them to. He said all the right things. He shook my hand firmly. He told me he had heard so much about me. He told me Claire talked about me constantly. She adores you, he said, and he smiled, and something in my stomach moved in a way I could not name. I am a 58-year-old woman. I am a retired nurse. I have spent 30 years watching people's faces for information, pain levels, consciousness, fear, deception. I have a finely calibrated internal instrument for reading human beings, and that instrument told me something was wrong with Daniel Ashworth from the very first moment. But Claire was glowing. Claire was happier than I had seen her in years. And I told myself so many times, that I was just a protective mother, that I was being paranoid, that I needed to get out of my own way and let my daughter live her life. That was my first mistake. They dated for 14 months. In that 14 months, Claire moved from Portland back to our hometown of Millhaven, Ohio, population 11,000, 2 churches per mile, and everybody knowing everybody's business because Daniel had a business there. He ran a property management company. He owned several rental properties around the county, did consulting work for some real estate developers, and by all outward appearances was a successful, stable, respectable man. She stopped taking the Portland job to be with him. I remember that conversation. We were on the phone, and I heard the careful lightness in her voice, the way she was bracing for my reaction while pretending she wasn't. I know it seems sudden, Mom, but he's the one. I know that sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy, I said carefully. It sounds like a very big decision. It is, and it's mine to make. I know it is, sweetheart. There was a pause. You don't like him. I want you to be happy. That's not what I asked. Claire, Mom, I need you to be happy for me. Can you do that? And what could I say? What mother could look into that hope and say no? So I said yes. I said I was happy for her. I said he seemed like a wonderful man. I buried that moving thing in my stomach and I smiled through the phone, and I began preparing myself to love whoever my daughter loved. They got engaged 11 months later. She called me crying happy tears, she said. He had proposed at the restaurant where they'd had their first date. He had gotten her grandmother's ring reset, my mother's ring, which had been passed down to Claire, and the gesture seemed romantic to her, seemed like he understood the importance of family and legacy. I tried to see it that way. I tried very hard. The wedding was in June, a small ceremony at a renovated barn outside Millhaven, white lights strung through old timber beams, wildflowers on every table, Claire in a simple dress that made her look like she had stepped out of a painting. It was genuinely, achingly beautiful. And I stood there in my seafoam blue dress and I watched my daughter marry Daniel Ashworth, and I thought, please let me be wrong about him. Please let this be the love she thinks it is. I was not wrong about him. It took another 18 months for me to understand just how right I had been. Part 2. The changes. They say that when a controlling person enters your life, the changes happen slowly. Like a frog in a pot of gradually heating water, the temperature rises degree by degree, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's too late to jump out. I watched my daughter change by degrees. The first thing I noticed was the phone calls. We used to talk every day, sometimes twice. Nothing important, just the ordinary texture of a mother-daughter relationship. How was work? Did she catch that documentary? Did she need that recipe I'd been meaning to send? After the wedding, the calls became every other day, then twice a week, then once a week. Each time she called, she sounded slightly more careful, slightly more measured, like she was editing herself before she spoke. I told myself she was just settling into married life. That was normal. That was what happened. The second thing I noticed was the Portland job. She mentioned once casually that she'd been looking at some environmental consulting firms in Columbus, still in Ohio, but closer. Daniel, she said, wasn't really comfortable with her working for out-of-state clients. It made scheduling difficult. It made things complicated. What kind of complications? I asked. Just, it's hard to explain. He likes to know my schedule. It's actually kind of sweet, Mom. He worries about me. I held the phone very still. He worries about your schedule. About me, about where I am. He just, after his ex-wife, he has some trust issues. It's understandable. I'm helping him work through them. His ex-wife, this was the first I had heard of an ex-wife. I filed that away. The third thing was the friends. Claire had a close group of girlfriends from college, Mara, Devon, Sunita. They had been inseparable for 4 years. By the end of Claire and Daniel's first year of marriage, she hadn't seen any of them in 8 months. Mara had called me, actually, something she'd never done before, just to say she was worried, that Claire had been cancelling plans, that she'd seemed different the last time they'd managed to get together. Quieter, more anxious. That she'd checked her phone constantly during dinner, and seemed relieved when Daniel texted to say he was home early. Does she seem okay to you? Mara asked carefully. I don't know, I said. It was the most honest thing I'd said in months. The fourth thing was my visit in October, 16 months after the wedding. I drove 4 hours to see her, the way I did every few months. But this time when I arrived, Daniel answered the door. Margaret. He said he never called me Mom, never called me anything warm, always Margaret. Claire's just finishing up some things, come on in. The house was beautiful and immaculate, showroom immaculate, the kind of clean that takes work, not happy lived-in work but anxious, compulsive work. There wasn't a thing out of place. Not a coffee mug on the counter, not a sweater over a chair, not a single piece of mail visible anywhere. It felt less like a home and more like a stage set. Claire came downstairs and hugged me, and I felt it. She had lost weight. Not dramatically, not in a way that would be immediately alarming, but I was her mother. I knew the weight of her. I knew the particular way she had always been softly, comfortably herself, and there was less of her now in some way that had nothing to do with pounds. You look tired, I said quietly, when Daniel stepped into the kitchen to get us coffee. I'm fine, Mom, she said. Her smile was quick and practiced. Are you sleeping? Of course. Claire. Daniel came back with the coffee. His timing was impeccable. It always was. I stayed 3 days. In those 3 days, I watched a dozen small moments that individually meant nothing and collectively meant everything. Claire asking Daniel before she agreed to my suggestion of going out to lunch, not just asking, checking. Waiting for his response with a tension in her jaw that disappeared only when he smiled and said sure. Claire's phone face down on the table at all times, and her reaching to check it whenever Daniel left the room. Claire laughing at something I said, and then glancing at Daniel to see how he received it. Small calibrations, constant calibrations, like she was a compass needle always finding magnetic north. On the last night, I lay in their guest room and I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about the frog in the pot of water. I thought about how long the heat had been rising. I thought about what I was going to do. I didn't know yet what I was going to do. I didn't have enough. I had a feeling, a nursing instinct, a mother's marrow-deep certainty, but I didn't have enough. I would have it soon. Part 3, the note. The following spring, 22 months after the wedding, Daniel's father turned 70. Gerald Ashworth was a man I had met precisely once, briefly, at the wedding. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders, with Daniel's blue eyes but something softer in them. He had shaken my hand and looked at me for a moment longer than was strictly conventional, and I had thought, oddly, this man knows something. The birthday party was held at Gerald's home, a farmhouse about 20 miles outside Millhaven. Daniel had organized it. He'd organized everything about it, I would later learn, down to the guest list and the seating arrangements. There were perhaps 30 people there. Neighbors, business associates, a few old friends of Gerald's, and a handful of people I recognized from Daniel's social circle. Gerald looked old. That was my first thought when I saw him. Not appropriately 70 old, but older than that, more tired, more hollowed. He moved slowly across the room toward the people who came to greet him, and he accepted their embraces with the careful dignity of a man who was rationing his energy. But his eyes were sharp, his eyes missed nothing. I had driven up alone. Tom, my husband, Claire's stepfather, was in Tucson helping his brother move and couldn't make it. I sat near Claire at a long table and watched her and watched Daniel, and watched the careful, airless ecosystem of their marriage playing out in this more public setting. I noticed that Daniel had seated himself at the opposite end of the table from his father. I noticed that Gerald watched Daniel the same way I watched him, with the measured attention of someone who sees clearly, but must be very careful about how they act on what they see. Halfway through dinner, Daniel stood up to give a toast. It was a good toast, smooth and warm, funny in the right places, sentimental without being saccharine. The room laughed and applauded. Claire smiled at her husband with an expression that took me a moment to identify. It was relief. She was relieved that he was performing well. She had been sitting rigidly through the whole dinner, I now realized, waiting for something, and the successful toast was a release valve. The toast ended, people raised their glasses, Daniel sat back down. And that was when Gerald got up to use the restroom, passing behind my chair, and I felt a light pressure on my left hand where it rested on the table, just a brief, deliberate touch, and then he was past me, moving slowly toward the hallway. I looked down. Under my hand was a folded piece of paper. I didn't pick it up immediately. My nursing instincts kicked in first. Stay calm, don't change your expression, look around. Daniel was talking to the man on his left. Claire was speaking to the woman on her right. No one was watching me. I covered the note with my hand, then moved my hand to my lap, bringing the note with it. Under the table, I unfolded it. The paper was lined, torn carefully from a small notebook, and the handwriting was deliberate and slightly shaky, the handwriting of an old man who had taken time and care with every letter. Take your daughter and leave now. Don't tell Daniel. Don't argue, just go. I will explain later. Please trust me. G. I sat very still. My heart was doing something loud and insistent in my chest. I breathed through it the way I had breathed through 1,000 difficult moments in hospital corridors. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay present, stay calm. I looked up. Gerald was returning from the hallway. He didn't look at me. He sat back down at his end of the table and picked up his fork as if nothing had happened. I looked at Claire. She was laughing at something, a real laugh, one of her genuine ones surprised out of her. And I thought, when is the last time I heard that? When is the last time she laughed without checking first? Daniel had stood to speak to someone behind him, his back briefly turned. I leaned over to Claire and I said quietly, naturally, as if I had just thought of something pleasant, "Sweetheart, I just remembered. I think I left my migraine medication in the car, and I can feel one starting. Will you come help me find it? I can never locate things in that bag of mine." She looked at me and for a fraction of a second, her eyes went to Daniel's back, and I saw it, the calculation, the checking, the what will he think. But a migraine was inarguably reasonable. She nodded. "Of course, Mom." We excused ourselves quietly. No one paid attention. Daniel didn't turn around. We walked out through the front door into the cool spring evening, down the porch steps, across the gravel driveway toward where I had parked at the far edge, beyond the other cars. When we were far enough away from the house, I stopped. "Mom, where's your car?" "Get in," I said. She blinked. "What?" "Claire, get in the car, right now." Her face changed. It went through several things quickly, confusion, alarm, and then a particular kind of fear that I recognized. Not fear of me, fear of what was coming, fear that something had been found out. "Mom, what?" "Please," I kept my voice very quiet and very steady. "I promise I will explain everything, but right now I need you to get in the car with me." She got in the car. I drove. Part 4, the drive. We were 2 miles down the road before Claire spoke. "He's going to notice I'm gone." "I know." "Mom." "I know." I kept driving. The country road was dark, the headlights cutting through the spring night, the fields on either side flat and hushed. "Let me ask you something, Claire, and I need you to hear it as a question, not an accusation." She was very still in the passenger seat. "Okay." When you realized we were leaving, not coming back in 5 minutes, but actually leaving, was your first thought about yourself? Or was it about Daniel? A long silence. "That's not fair." "I'm not trying to be fair, I'm trying to understand." Another silence, longer, and then very quietly, "Him." "Tell me about that." "Mom." "Please." She looked out the window. The fields went by. Somewhere a dog was barking at something in the dark. "He doesn't like it when things change without warning," she said finally. "He doesn't like surprises. If something changes and he doesn't know about it in advance, he what? He gets upset." "What does that look like when he gets upset?" She pressed her lips together. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, driving steady. "Claire, what does it look like?" "He doesn't hit me." Her voice was very careful. "I know that's what you're thinking. He's never hit me. I know there are a lot of ways to hurt someone." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, he yells. He goes very quiet, like a specific kind of quiet that means something bad is coming. He'll go through my phone. He'll cancel plans I've made without telling me. He'll tell me things about myself. Things I've done wrong. for hours sometimes. And I sit there and I try to explain, but every explanation makes it worse. So eventually I just stop explaining and I wait for it to be over. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. How long? I asked. I don't, Mom, it wasn't like this at the beginning. I know, that's how it works. How long has it been like this? She pulled her knees up toward her chest, making herself small in the passenger seat. In that moment she looked 17. She looked like the girl who used to sit in my car after bad days at school and let me drive her around until she was ready to talk. My heart broke open along a seam that had been developing for 2 years. About 8 months in, she said, but there were little signs before that. Clea. I know, Mom. You should have told me. I know, her voice cracked on the second syllable. I was embarrassed. I kept thinking it was going to get better. I thought it was something I was doing, that if I could just figure out what I was doing wrong. You were not doing anything wrong. I know that now, in my head I know it, but it's different when you're inside it. It's so different when you're inside it. Everything, he has this way of making everything feel like your fault. Like if you were better, if you were easier to love, if you were more organized or more thoughtful or less emotional, then he wouldn't have to be this way. And you start to believe it because what's the alternative? That you married someone who doesn't love you. That you gave up Portland and your friends and she stopped, pressed her hand against her mouth. I pulled the car onto a wide gravel shoulder on the edge of a field and put it in park and turned to her, and she was crying, not the pretty kind of crying, but the real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and structural, the kind that sounds like something that has been held in too long finally getting out. I put my arms around her and she folded into me, and I held her in the dark on the side of that country road the same way I had held her when she was 3 and had nightmares, when she was 8 and fell off her bike, when she was 15 and her first boyfriend had broken her heart. She was my daughter and she was in pain, and I held her and I didn't try to make the pain stop, I just held it with her. When it passed, partially, she sat back and wiped her face with the back of her hand. How did you know? She asked. Tonight, I mean, how did you know to leave? I reached into my pocket and gave her the note. She read it again. His father wrote this. Yes. She sat with that for a moment. Daniel doesn't talk about his father much. He says they're not close. He says Gerald was cold, absent. She paused. He says his father never really knew how to connect with people. And you've met Gerald. Does he seem cold to you? She thought about it. No, he seems sad and careful. People who have lived with someone like Daniel, I said, learn to be very careful. She looked at me. You think Daniel's always been this way? I think people like Daniel usually have histories that look a certain way, and Gerald's note suggests to me that he has watched his son for a very long time and knows exactly what he is. Clea looked down at the note. What are we going to do? First, I said, you're going to call Gerald and tell him you're safe. Then you're going to call Mara and see if we can drive to her place tonight. She's in Columbus, that's a few hours. And Daniel. Daniel can wait. Daniel is not the priority tonight. You are. She looked out at the dark field for a moment. A breeze moved through the early crops, barely visible in the moonlight, just a shimmer of pale green. Mom, she said, I'm scared. I know. Not of leaving. I want to leave. I realize that now, sitting here. But I'm scared of what he'll do. He'll call everyone. He'll tell them things. He has a way of he's very convincing. People always believe him. Then we'll make sure you tell your story first, and Gerald will help. She looked at me. You trust a man you've met twice. I trust what his note says, and I trust what I see in you. I held her gaze. I've been a nurse for 30 years, baby. I know the face of someone who's been hurt for a long time. I know the face of someone who has learned to manage someone else's moods to stay safe. I've seen it in emergency rooms and I've seen it in patient intake forms, and I see it every time I look at you, and it is breaking my heart. My voice held steady because I needed it to. We're going to be okay. I promise you we're going to be okay. She nodded, small, uncertain, but real. She picked up her phone and called Gerald Ashworth. Part 5, the explanation. Gerald answered on the second ring. He had been waiting. Clea put him on speaker, and his voice came through the phone, rough and slow and deliberate, the voice of a man who had spent a lifetime being very careful with words. Clea, he said, are you all right? I'm all right, we're down the road, I'm with my mother. Good, a long breath, good. Will you tell us, she asked, please? Silence, not the uncomfortable kind, the weighted kind, the kind that precedes something difficult and necessary. Daniel's mother left when he was 13, Gerald said. Left and didn't come back. I won't go into all of it, but it wasn't the way he tells it. He was not a victim of an absent mother. His mother left because she was afraid. The way she was afraid was the same way I started to see you were afraid. The same posture, the same careful way of moving through a room. The way your eyes moved when he was nearby. A silence. I'm sorry, he continued. I'm sorry I waited too long tonight. I watched you all evening. I saw the way you held yourself. And when he stood up to give that toast and your whole body changed, that's when I wrote the note. I had the paper in my pocket. I'd been carrying it for a week, if you want to know the truth. Since the last time you two visited and I watched you apologize to him for burning the coffee cake. You apologized 3 times for a coffee cake. Clea made a small sound. I have been watching my son become this person for 20 years, Gerald said. His voice was steady but weighted with something that would take lifetimes to put down. I have asked myself every day what I could have done differently, whether it was my fault, whether something I did or failed to do made him this way. I don't have a clean answer to that, and I've stopped looking for one, but I know what he is, and I know what he does to people. And I was not willing to sit at a birthday party and watch him do it to you and do nothing. Gerald, I said, what did he do, specifically? I need to understand the full scope of it. A pause. Who is this? Margaret, Clea's mother. Margaret, something shifted in his voice, a warmth, a recognition. He talked about you, not kindly. He said you were overbearing, that you didn't respect boundaries, that you were the kind of woman who would never let her daughter be her own person. I absorbed that. He says things like that, Gerald continued, about people who see through him. It's how you know who the real threat is. They're the ones he preemptively discredits. What did he do? I asked again, specifically. Gerald told us. He told us about Daniel's first serious girlfriend in college, who had filed a police report that was later withdrawn. He told us about a woman named Sasha, who Daniel had dated for 3 years in his mid-20s, who had left the state and still did not go by her real name online. He told us about the ex-wife. Her name was Rachel. She had lasted 4 years. She had left with a restraining order and nothing else because Daniel had systematically moved their shared assets into accounts she couldn't access. He told us about the property management business and the tenants who had complained of harassment, of lease agreements that contained clauses no normal tenant would catch, of people who had tried to dispute charges and found themselves suddenly, mysteriously struggling to find references for their next rental. He told us about the pattern, the careful selection of partners, smart women, independent women, women with ambition and careers and strong family relationships, women who would be good to break, because breaking something good was the point, because control over someone vibrant and free meant more than control over someone already diminished. He is very good at this, Gerald said, and there was grief in every syllable. He has had a lot of practice, and he has never been properly held accountable, because he is also very good at being believed. We're going to need everything you know, I said. Names, dates, anything in writing if you have it. I've been keeping records for 11 years, Gerald said. I have a file. Clea was very quiet beside me. Clea, Gerald said gently, this is not your fault. I need you to hear that. You are not foolish or naive. He is practiced. He is deliberate. He targeted you very specifically because he saw the things in you that were worth targeting. Your openness, your capacity for loyalty, your love for your mother. A pause. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. I am sorry for every day I knew and didn't act. You acted tonight, Clea said. Her voice was rough. Yes, that matters. Part 6, Columbus and After. Mara's apartment in Columbus was the first place my daughter breathed freely in 2 years. I watched it happen literally. We drove through the night and arrived at 2 in the morning, and Mara opened the door in her pajamas without a question asked, and she just opened her arms and Clea walked into them, and somewhere in that embrace something released in my daughter's body. I saw it, the long exhale, the way her shoulders came down from around her ears, the way her spine stopped bracing. We stayed 3 days. In those 3 days we made calls. Clea's first call was to a domestic abuse hotline, and I sat in the kitchen while she talked in the bedroom, and I listened to the shape of the conversation without hearing the words, and when she came out an hour later she looked wrung out and clean, like a cloth that had been washed after a long time in the dirt. Her second call was to an attorney, a family law specialist in Columbus, referred by the hotline. They met the next afternoon. Clea came back from that meeting with pages of notes and a plan. The attorney had heard about cases like Daniel's before. She knew the landscape. She knew what to protect and what to document and what to expect. He's going to fight it, Claire said, sitting at Mara's kitchen table with her notes spread before her. The attorney thinks he'll try to claim assets. The house, we bought it in both our names, but the down payment came from his account. There are some accounts he moved. What can you demonstrate? I asked. She listed it. The attorney had told her that the financial abuse, documented, was actually a significant legal factor. The restraining order from Rachel could potentially be entered as prior history, Gerald's records, the police report from college. It's going to be a process, she said. Yes, I said, but it's a process with an end. Daniel had called, repeatedly, first with confusion, then with concern, then with a coldness that confirmed everything we already knew. He had called me twice, which I did not answer, and on the second call left a voicemail that was a masterpiece of calm, reasonable manipulation. His voice was patient and saddened. He expressed concern for Claire's mental health. He said he thought she was having some kind of crisis, that she had been struggling for a while, and he had been trying to support her, and he was deeply worried. He said he hoped I hadn't said anything to upset her, and that he trusted I would encourage her to come home so they could work through whatever this was together. I played it for the attorney. Save that, she said, that's useful. I saved it. Part 7, Gerald's File. 3 weeks later, Gerald Ashworth drove 4 hours to Columbus and sat at Mara's kitchen table and put a manila folder in front of us. In my 30 years of nursing, I had seen a lot of things that were hard to look at. This folder was harder than most of them. It was a detailed accounting of a decade of harm, newspaper clippings, printed emails, screenshots of texts, handwritten notes in Gerald's careful, shaky script, a copy of Rachel's restraining order, a name and phone number, Sasha's new name, her current city, a notation that she had agreed, if it came to it, to make a statement. Gerald sat at the table and looked at the folder and did not look at us, and I understood that he was carrying something very heavy and had been carrying it for a very long time. Why didn't you do this before? Claire asked. Her voice wasn't accusatory, it was genuinely asking. I tried, he said. With Rachel, I gave her what I had, but she was so broken by the time it was over that she didn't want to fight anymore. She just wanted to leave, she just wanted to disappear. He paused. I understood that, but I've regretted it ever since. And Sasha? Sasha fought, she got the restraining order, but she got it in a different county, different jurisdiction. It didn't follow him the way it should have. He folded his hands on the table. The system has a lot of seams in it. He knows where the seams are. What made you decide to act tonight? I asked, at the party. He looked up at me. 3 things. First, I watch you watching him, and I thought, this woman sees what I see. Second, Daniel told me last month that you two were trying to get pregnant. He looked at Claire. He said it as if it were your idea, but I know how he presents these things. Claire's face went very still. He has been pressuring me about that, she said quietly. I wasn't ready and she stopped. Gerald nodded. He didn't need the rest of the sentence. The third thing, he said, my birthday. He organized my birthday party, every detail, the guest list, the seating. He put me at the far end of the table from him. He paused. He did that so I couldn't get to you easily. He knew on some level that I was watching him. He tried to engineer distance between us. But you still got to me. I got up to use the restroom. The corner of his mouth moved, almost imperceptibly. He forgot that an old man needs to use the restroom frequently. Part 8, The Reckoning. The divorce took 14 months. Daniel fought it as predicted. He hired an aggressive attorney and pursued every avenue available to him. He disputed the house valuation. He filed a counter-complaint that painted Claire as unstable and impulsive. He reached out to friends and presented his version of events with the polished, plausible calm that had always been his most effective weapon. Some people believed him. I will not pretend otherwise. Some people who had been friendly to Claire quietly became unavailable. This hurt her. It hurt her badly. There were weeks when she called me and cried not about Daniel, not about the process, but about the specific loneliness of having your truth disbelieved. But some people did not believe him. Mara, Devin, and Sunita held her up all 14 months. They showed up in practical, unglamorous ways, driving her to appointments, feeding her, sitting with her through the long evenings after hard legal days. Mara took her in for 7 months while the house was in dispute. The attorney was formidable. Gerald's records were formidable. Rachel's testimony, which she gave in a signed declaration from her new city under her new name, was formidable. The voicemail Daniel had left me was used in a court filing that I will simply say was very effective. There is a particular moment I will carry for the rest of my life. It was toward the end of the divorce proceedings, a grey afternoon in February, and Claire and I were sitting in the attorney's waiting room after a session that had gone well. Claire had been composed through the whole meeting, strong, clear, detailed, the kind of witness who is impossible to easily dismiss. And in the waiting room after, she turned to me and said, "I testified today." "You did," I said. I said all of it out loud, to people I don't know, in a room where it's recorded. She looked at her hands. I thought I wouldn't be able to. I've been dreaming about being in that room and losing my voice. Literally, in the dreams, I open my mouth and nothing comes out. But today everything came out. She looked up at me. There was something new in her face, not happiness, not yet, but something that would become happiness eventually. Something like reclamation, something like the beginning of getting herself back. "I'm going to be okay, Mom." "I know," I said. "Not because everything worked out, the legal stuff might still." "I know, I mean you, the inside of you, that's going to be okay." She leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she had when she was small. We sat like that in the grey February waiting room, and outside the windows the city moved through its ordinary afternoon, and I thought about the frog in the pot of water, and how this particular frog had jumped out. She had jumped out, with a little help from a note on a piece of lined paper, torn carefully from a small notebook by a shaky-handed old man at a birthday party. The divorce was finalized in April. Part 9. Gerald Ashworth came to Claire's new apartment for dinner that September. She had a studio in Columbus, small, bright, near Mara's place, full of plants. It looked like her. It looked like who she was when she wasn't being managed and minimized. She cooked his favorite thing, pot roast, which he had mentioned once in passing and which she had filed away. He came in and looked around at her apartment with its books everywhere and its mismatched mugs on the counter and the dried flowers in a jar on the windowsill, and he said, "You live here." "I do," she said. "It's nice." He said it simply, without elaboration, but the way he said it contained a great deal. Over dinner I asked him how he was doing. He had been, I knew this much, in something of a difficult situation since the divorce. Daniel was not speaking to him. This was not surprising, and Gerald had expected it, but it was still the experience of losing a son, of a kind. "I lost him a long time ago," Gerald said when I put it to him gently. "That's the honest answer. Whatever he was supposed to become, whatever I had hoped for, that's been gone for a long time. What I've been grieving lately isn't really the present, it's the past. It's the boy I thought I saw occasionally, that I now think I was perhaps imagining." A difficult thing to say, a difficult thing to carry. "You're not responsible for what he became," Claire said. "I'm not entirely not responsible either." He said it the way someone says a thing they have examined thoroughly and arrived at honestly. "I was not always present when I should have been. His mother leaving the way she left, I don't know, and I'll never know what exactly that planted. I only know what grew." He looked at Claire. "But what I am responsible for now is trying to do the right thing with what I know, that I can do, that I am doing." "The note," I said, "on that evening, how long had you been debating it?" "A while," he said. "I'd watched you arrive and I watched you watching him the way I watched him, and I thought, here is someone who knows. And then you were sitting there at dinner and I thought, if not now, when? I'm 70 years old. I don't have a lot of time left for when." He looked at me with those sharp, sad blue eyes. "I've spent too much of my life not saying the thing I needed to say, waiting for the right moment." The right moment came and went a dozen times with Rachel, with Sasha, with women before them that you don't know about, and each time I didn't act, someone paid for it. He set down his fork. I made myself a promise after Rachel, that if I saw it happening again I would do something. It took me too long to do it even after I made that promise, but I did it. "You did it," Claire said softly, "and it mattered." He nodded just once and went back to his pot roast. Part 10 now. Claire is 31 now, the same age Daniel was when I first met him at that graduation party. She's working for an environmental consulting firm. It is not in Portland. She decided she liked Columbus, liked the life she had built there, liked the apartment with the plants and the mismatched mugs. She is good at her work. She is the kind of person who is always going to be good at something, because she has that quality of attention and care that makes people capable of great things when someone isn't systematically working to diminish them. She is in therapy, has been for 2 years, the same therapist, a calm woman with an office full of natural light. She talks about what she learned about herself, about the patterns she brought into the relationship before Daniel ever exploited them, about what it means to choose a person slowly and carefully with your eyes open. She does not talk about it as damage. She talks about it as education. Expensive, painful 2 years of her life education, but education. She is not in a relationship right now, and she seems at peace with that. She goes to dinner with Mara and Devin and Sunita. She hikes on weekends with a group she found through a local club. She calls me still, most days, not because she needs to check in with me or because a checked phone makes her less anxious, but because she likes talking to me, because we are friends as well as family, because the version of herself that calls me daily is the version she was always supposed to be. Gerald and I have coffee once a month or so when he makes the drive to Columbus. He is slowing down, his health is not what it was, but he is present in a way that I think he may not have been for much of his life. He and Claire have built something slowly that neither of them quite has a name for. Not family exactly, or not simply family, something more particular. Two people who were adjacent to a harmful man and chose in their different ways to act rather than endure. That is a bond. He told me once, over coffee, that the night of his birthday party was the best decision he had made in a decade. A piece of paper, he said, a pencil, 6 words. 7 words, I said, take your daughter and leave now, that's 7. He counted on his fingers and made a face. 7 words, you'd think 70 years of life would have taught me to count. I laughed, he laughed. We sat in a coffee shop in Columbus on a Tuesday morning and laughed at a small thing, and outside the windows the city moved through its ordinary life, full of ordinary people carrying their ordinary weight. I think about that note sometimes. How small it was, torn from a notebook, folded twice, slipped under hand at a dinner table. How much it contained. How many moments of watching and waiting and grieving and record-keeping and regret and finally choosing to act were concentrated in those 7 words. How a dinner party full of 30 people, none of whom knew quite what was happening, contained within it the fulcrum point of my daughter's life, the moment before and the moment after. There is something I want to say about trust. About how I made a decision in the dark of that gravel parking lot to trust a man I barely knew, to trust a piece of paper, to trust my own reading of the room. Nursing taught me that trust is not the same as certainty. You never have certainty. You have information and instinct, and you make a call and you act on it, and sometimes you're wrong and you update and you keep going. I trusted Gerald's note not because I knew he was right, but because everything I had seen and felt and suspected for 2 years told me that his note was pointing in the same direction as all of it. When your information and your instinct converge, you act. And I want to say something about watching, about the particular, terrible, necessary act of watching someone you love exist inside a situation that is hurting them, and knowing you cannot remove them, cannot force them, can only be present and wait and watch for the moment when the door opens even a crack and you can offer your hand. Mothers know this watching. It is one of the hardest things. To watch your child in pain and know that your love, however real, is not the same as their will, and their will is the only thing that can ultimately choose a different life. You can hand someone the door, they have to walk through it. Claire walked through it. She walked through it in a parking lot in the dark, a mile down the road from a farmhouse birthday party, while her husband was still inside thinking she'd gone for migraine medication. She walked through it on trust and love, and 30 years of a relationship with a mother who showed up. She walked through it because when I said get in the car, she got in the car. And she is all right, she is more than all right. She is exactly who she was always going to be, finding her way back to herself, one ordinary Columbus day at a time. I don't know what happened to Daniel. I have not tried to find out. I believe that is the right approach. I believe that some chapters close and should stay closed, and I have no desire to look backward into his direction. Whatever accountability found him or failed to find him is a matter for other systems, other people, other conversations. My conversation is with my daughter, and it is ongoing, and it is good. I keep Gerald's note. I found it in my coat pocket the day after the birthday party, and I smoothed it out, and I put it between 2 pieces of wax paper, and I keep it in the drawer of my nightstand. On bad nights, I sometimes take it out and read those 7 words and think about 70 years of watching, and one evening when it finally mattered, and one old man who decided to act. Take your daughter and leave now. 7 words. It was enough. For every parent watching, for every old man with a piece of paper and a moment of courage, for every daughter who got in the car.